The NFL draft is supposed to build dynasties. Teams spend millions on scouting, analytics, and war rooms filled with experts who've studied tape for months. But sometimes, one single pick can set a franchise back for decades. What I'm about to show you will change how you think about the draft forever. I spent weeks researching every catastrophic pick that didn't just bust, but actually destroyed the teams that selected them. These aren't your typical draft failures. These are franchise killers. By the end of this video, you'll know the truth about how one decision on draft day can turn a Super Bowl contender into a laughingstock, cost coaches their jobs, and leave fan bases in ruins for years. The league doesn't want you to see these stories connected, but when you put them together, the pattern is undeniable. Ryan Leaf, San Diego Chargers, 1998, second overall. Let's start with the most obvious one, but not for the reasons you think. Ryan Leaf didn't just fail as a quarterback. He took the entire Chargers organization down with him. In 1998, San Diego had a choice: Peyton Manning or Ryan Leaf. They chose Leaf, and it wasn't even close in their minds. The Chargers were so convinced Leaf was their guy that they traded up to get him. They gave up 2 first-round picks, a second-rounder, and Pro Bowl linebacker Patrick Surtain to move from 3rd to 2nd overall. But here's what makes this a franchise destroyer. Leaf's attitude was so toxic that it infected the entire locker room. Veterans started requesting trades. The coaching staff lost credibility. Season ticket holders stopped showing up. In his rookie year, Leaf threw 2 touchdowns and 15 interceptions. But the real damage was behind the scenes. He screamed at reporters, got into fights with teammates, and showed up to meetings unprepared. The Chargers went 5-11 in 1998, 8-8 in 1999, and 1-15 in 2000. Head coach Kevin Gilbride was fired. General manager Bobby Beathard retired early. The franchise didn't recover until they drafted Drew Brees in 2001, 3 years too late. Meanwhile, Peyton Manning was winning Rookie of the Year and building a Hall of Fame career in Indianapolis. JaMarcus Russell, Oakland Raiders, 2007, first overall. If Ryan Leaf destroyed a franchise through attitude, JaMarcus Russell did it through pure laziness, and the Raiders enabled every second of it. Oakland was desperate for a franchise quarterback after years of mediocrity. Russell had the strongest arm scouts had ever seen. He could throw a football 70 yards from his knees. The Raiders were mesmerized. They signed him to a 6-year, $68 million contract with $31 million guaranteed. At the time, it was the largest rookie deal in NFL history. But Russell didn't want to play football. He wanted to get paid. Here's the story that sums up his entire career. The Raiders coaching staff suspected Russell wasn't watching game film, so they gave him a blank DVD and told him it was upcoming opponent footage. The next week, they asked him about it. Russell said he watched it and was ready to go. He had watched a blank DVD and claimed he studied it. Russell started 31 games over 3 seasons. His completion percentage was 52.1%. He threw 18 touchdowns and 23 interceptions, but the real damage was the opportunity cost. While Russell was collecting paychecks, the Raiders went 7 for 25 in games he started. They missed the playoffs every year. Head coach Lane Kiffin was fired mid-season in 2008. The entire offensive system had to be rebuilt around a quarterback who refused to learn it. The Raiders didn't draft another quarterback in the first round until Derek Carr in 2014, 7 years later. They wasted the prime years of players like Darren McFadden and Nnamdi Asomugha because they had no quarterback to get them the ball. Akili Smith, Cincinnati Bengals, 1999, 3rd overall. The 1999 draft was loaded with talent. Edgerrin James, Ricky Williams, Torrey Holt, Champ Bailey, all future Hall of Famers or Pro Bowlers, were available when Cincinnati picked 3rd. The Bengals chose Akili Smith, a quarterback from Oregon who had started exactly 12 college games. But this wasn't just a bad evaluation. This was organizational malpractice. The New Orleans Saints offered Cincinnati their entire 1999 draft, all 7 picks, plus their 1st and 3rd round picks in 2000. 9 total picks for Akili Smith. The Bengals said no. Think about that. 9 draft picks, including multiple first-rounders, for a quarterback who had barely played in college. Cincinnati turned it down because they were convinced Smith was the next Steve Young. Smith started 17 games over 4 seasons. He completed 46% of his passes and threw 5 touchdowns against 13 interceptions. The Bengals went 3-14 in his starts. Meanwhile, the Saints used those picks they offered Cincinnati to build a playoff team. They drafted running back Ricky Williams, who rushed for over 1,000 yards as a rookie. The Bengals didn't make the playoffs until 2005, 6 years after passing on 9 draft picks for a quarterback who couldn't complete half his passes. Charles Rogers, Detroit Lions, 2003, 2nd overall. Detroit in 2003 was a franchise in freefall. They'd gone 3-13 the previous season and desperately needed playmakers. Charles Rogers from Michigan State looked like the answer. Rogers was a local hero. He'd dominated Big Ten defenses and had the size and speed to be an elite NFL receiver. The Lions were convinced they'd found their Calvin Johnson before Calvin Johnson existed. But Rogers had a problem. His body was made of glass, and his mind wasn't built for professional football. He broke his collarbone in his 5th NFL game. When he came back, he broke it again. Then he started failing drug tests for marijuana. The Lions suspended him multiple times, but kept giving him chances because they'd invested so much in him. The Lions built their entire offensive system around Rogers. They passed on defensive players like Terrell Suggs and Jason Witten because they thought Rogers would be their offensive centerpiece for a decade. Rogers played 15 games over 3 seasons. He caught 36 passes for 440 yards and 4 touchdowns. That's it. The Lions went 10-for-38 during his time with the team. Head coach Steve Mariucci was fired after the 2005 season. General manager Matt Millen was eventually fired in 2008. The Lions went 0-16 in 2008, becoming the first team in NFL history to lose every game in a 16-game season. The franchise didn't recover until they drafted Calvin Johnson in 2007, 4 years after wasting the pick on Rogers. Vernon Gholston, New York Jets, 2008, 6th overall. The Jets in 2008 thought they were building something special. They'd just acquired Brett Favre and believed they were one pass rusher away from a Super Bowl run. Vernon Gholston from Ohio State looked like that missing piece. He was 6 feet 3 inches, 266 pounds, and ran a 4.5 840-yard dash. He dominated college football with 14 sacks as a senior. The Jets were so confident in Gholston that they passed on players like Jared Mayo, who became Defensive Rookie of the Year with New England, and Chris Johnson, who rushed for 2,000 yards with Tennessee. Gholston played 3 seasons with the Jets. He recorded 0 sacks, not 1. In 3 full seasons as a pass rusher, he never brought down a quarterback. But the real damage was how the Jets structured their defense around him. They moved other players out of position to accommodate Gholston's supposed pass rushing ability. When he couldn't rush the passer, their entire defensive scheme collapsed. The Jets went 9-7, 9-7, and 11-5 during Gholston's 3 seasons, but they never made it past the AFC Championship game. Many believe a competent pass rusher in Gholston's spot would have put them over the top. Head coach Eric Mangini was fired after 2008. The defensive coordinator was replaced. The Jets didn't draft another defensive end in the 1st round until Leonard Williams in 2015. Trent Richardson, Cleveland Browns, 2012, 3rd overall. They had the 3rd pick and a choice. Take a quarterback like Ryan Tannehill or Russell Wilson, or go with the safe pick in Alabama, running back Trent Richardson. Richardson looked like a sure thing. He dominated at Alabama, winning a national championship and looking unstoppable against SEC defenses. The Browns convinced themselves he was the next Adrian Peterson. But Richardson had a fatal flaw. He couldn't see the field. Despite his physical tools, he had no vision as a runner. He'd run straight into his own linemen instead of finding holes. The Browns built their entire offensive identity around Richardson. They invested heavily in their offensive line to create running lanes for him. They designed plays specifically for his skill set. Richardson rushed for 950 yards as a rookie, which looked decent on paper. But anyone watching the games could see he was leaving yards on the field with every carry. Here's where it gets embarrassing. After just 18 games, the Browns traded Richardson to Indianapolis for a first-round pick. They essentially admitted they'd wasted the 3rd overall pick after one season. But the damage was done. The Browns had passed on quarterback Russell Wilson, who went to Seattle in the 3rd round and immediately became a franchise player. They'd wasted a year of development and resources on a running back who couldn't run. Cleveland went 5-11 in 2012 and 4-12 in 2013. Head coach Pat Shurmur was fired. The Browns didn't have a winning season until 2020, 8 years later. Dion Jordan, Miami Dolphins, 2013 3rd overall. Miami in 2013 thought they were getting creative. Instead of taking a traditional pass rusher, they drafted Dion Jordan from Oregon, a hybrid linebacker and defensive end who could supposedly do everything. The Dolphins traded up to get Jordan, giving up their 2nd-round pick to move from 12th to 3rd overall. They were convinced Jordan's versatility would revolutionize their defense. But Jordan had 2 problems. He couldn't stay healthy, and he couldn't stay away from drugs. Jordan was suspended multiple times for violating the NFL's substance abuse policy. When he was on the field, he looked lost. He was too small to rush the passer consistently and too slow to cover receivers in space. The Dolphins tried to use Jordan as a linebacker, a defensive end, and even in coverage. Nothing worked. He recorded 3 sacks in 3 seasons with Miami. But here's the kicker. The Dolphins passed on players who became stars elsewhere. Star Latalele went 14th to Carolina and became a Pro Bowl defensive tackle. DeAndre Hopkins went 27th to Houston and became one of the best receivers in the NFL. Miami's defense never developed the pass rush they desperately needed. They went 8-8, 8-8, and 6-10 during Jordan's 3 seasons. Head coach Joe Philbin was fired mid-season in 2015. The Dolphins didn't make the playoffs until 2016, and even then, they were eliminated in the 1st round. They wasted years of Ryan Tannehill's development because they couldn't protect him or get pressure on opposing quarterbacks. Johnny Manziel, Cleveland Browns, 2014 22nd overall. Cleveland couldn't help themselves. 2 years after the Trent Richardson disaster, they were back to making franchise-altering mistakes in the draft. Johnny Manziel from Texas A&M was the most polarizing prospect in years. He was electric in college, but scouts questioned his size, his work ethic, and his off-field behavior. The Browns had done their homework. They'd interviewed Manziel extensively and were convinced he'd matured. They traded up to get him, giving up their 3rd and 5th round picks to move from 26th to 22nd overall. But Manziel didn't want to be a professional football player. He wanted to be a celebrity who occasionally played football. He showed up to meetings hungover. He was caught partying during the season. He lied to coaches about his whereabouts and his preparation. When he did play, he looked completely overwhelmed by NFL defenses. Manziel started 8 games over 2 seasons. He threw 7 touchdowns and 7 interceptions while completing just 57% of his passes. The Browns went 2-6 in his starts. But the real damage was organizational. The Browns had passed on quarterback Derek Carr, who went to Oakland 4 picks later and became a franchise player. They'd wasted another high pick on a quarterback who didn't want to play quarterback. Head coach Mike Petting was fired after 2015. General manager Ray Farmer was fired the same day. The Browns went 3-13 and 1-15 in his 2 seasons. Cleveland didn't find their franchise quarterback until they drafted Baker Mayfield in 2018. 4 years and countless losses later. Paxton Lynch, Denver Broncos, 2016 26th overall. Denver in 2016 was coming off a Super Bowl victory, but they knew they had a quarterback problem. Peyton Manning had retired, and they needed to find his replacement. The Broncos traded up to get Paxton Lynch from Memphis, giving up their 3rd and 4th round picks to move from 31st to 26th overall. They were convinced Lynch's arm strength and mobility made him the perfect fit for their system. But Lynch had the mental makeup of a backup quarterback trying to play like a starter. He couldn't handle pressure, both literally and figuratively. When NFL pass rushers came after him, he panicked. When coaches put pressure on him to perform, he crumbled. Lynch started 4 games over 2 seasons. He completed 59% of his passes and threw 4 touchdowns against 4 interceptions. The Broncos went 1-3 in his starts. Here's what destroyed this franchise. Denver passed on Dak Prescott, who went to Dallas in the 4th round and immediately became a franchise quarterback. They also passed on several defensive players who could have helped maintain their championship-level defense. The Broncos went 9-7, 5-11, and 6-10 for Lynch's 3 seasons with the team. They missed the playoffs every year. Head coach Gary Kubiak retired after 2016, partly due to health issues, but also because of the quarterback situation. Denver didn't find stability at quarterback until they traded for Joe Flacco in 2019. And even that was temporary. They wasted the final years of their championship defense because they couldn't find a quarterback to manage the game. Solomon Thomas, San Francisco 49ers, 2017, 3rd overall. San Francisco in 2017 was rebuilding under new head coach Kyle Shanahan. They had the 3rd pick and a choice. Take a quarterback like Deshaun Watson or go with the safe pick in Stanford defensive lineman Solomon Thomas. Thomas looked like a perfect fit. He was a local product who dominated Pac-12 offenses and had the versatility to play multiple positions on the defensive line. But Thomas had a fatal flaw. He was a tweener who wasn't elite at any one position. He was too small to be a dominant defensive tackle and not fast enough to be a consistent edge rusher. The 49ers tried to use him everywhere, which meant he never developed expertise anywhere. Thomas recorded 6.5 sacks over 4 seasons with San Francisco. For a 3rd overall pick, that's catastrophic production. The 49ers passed on Deshaun Watson, who went to Houston 2 picks later and immediately became a franchise quarterback. They also passed on Christian McCaffrey, who went to Carolina and became one of the best running backs in the NFL. San Francisco went 6-10, 4-12, 13-3, and 6-10 during Thomas's 4 seasons. The one good year came despite Thomas, not because of him. The 49ers didn't find their franchise quarterback until they traded for Jimmy Garoppolo later in 2017, and even that was temporary. They eventually had to trade up to draft Trey Lance in 2021, giving up multiple 1st-round picks to fix their quarterback situation. Isaiah Wilson, Tennessee Titans, 2020, 29th overall. Let's end with the most recent disaster, and maybe the most embarrassing. Isaiah Wilson from Georgia was supposed to be the Titans' franchise right tackle for the next decade. He had elite size and athleticism, and Tennessee desperately needed offensive line help to protect Ryan Tannehill. The Titans traded up to get Wilson, giving up their 4th and 7th round picks to move from 61st to 29th overall. They were convinced Wilson would anchor their line for years to come. But Wilson didn't want to play football. He wanted to party. Before he even played a snap, Wilson was arrested for DUI. Then he violated COVID-19 protocols multiple times. He showed up to practice out of shape and unprepared. When coaches tried to discipline him, he simply didn't show up. Wilson played exactly 4 offensive snaps in his entire NFL career. 4. The Titans waived him after just 1 season, making him one of the shortest tenured 1st-round picks in NFL history. But here's the thing. The Titans passed on players like T. Higgins, who went to Cincinnati and became a Pro Bowl receiver. They wasted a 1st-round pick on a player who didn't even want to be there. Tennessee's offensive line struggled throughout 2020 and 2021. They couldn't protect Tannehill consistently, and their running game suffered. The team that had been 1 game away from the Super Bowl in 2019 missed the playoffs in 2020. Wilson was out of the league by 2021. The Titans didn't recover their offensive line stability until they signed multiple free agents in 2022, 2 years and millions of dollars later. These aren't just draft busts. These are franchise killers, players who didn't just fail individually, but took entire organizations down with them. From Ryan Leaf's toxic attitude to JaMarcus Russell's laziness to Isaiah Wilson's complete disregard for football, these picks prove that one bad decision on draft day can haunt a franchise for years. The scary part, every single one of these teams thought they were making the right choice. They had scouts, analytics, interviews, and workouts. but they still got it catastrophically wrong. And that's the raw truth about the NFL draft. Sometimes the sure thing is the most dangerous pick of all. If you want to see more stories the league doesn't want you to know about, smash that like button and let me know in the comments which draft disaster hurt your team the most. And if you're ready for more unfiltered NFL content that cuts through the BS, subscribe and hit the notification bell. Because just like these franchises learned the hard way, you never know when the next disaster is coming, but at least here, you'll see it coming before everyone else. See you in the next one.